We've got some time to convince them to all be Supply Corps officers like their mom. But so speaking on behalf of this esteemed panel, who we know from their bios, these ladies are sassy, have sharp wit, put together, true partners to their spouses, all the things that we spouses aspire to be. Being a military spouse, as all of us spouses know, is not for the faint of heart. And these women have, in the South we call it grit and moxie, and they have and have developed from the experiences of the military lifestyle, emotional intelligence, can-do attitude, the hard skills, the soft skills, mission-driven, everything that is typically associated with veterans as they're transitioning into the civilian life cycle. I always like to say, and spouses too, kind of, and backwards and in high heels. You can call it an esprit de corps, and I call it a patriotism of benevolence. That's just a big word for esprit de corps, but since I am a military spouse, I'm way overeducated because no one would hire me, so I went to school until they basically said, stop. You cannot, you've hit the roof. But as I've spoken with these women, read their bios, checked out their websites, I'm reminded of the time that my own husband, when I told him about this panel, and said, you know, the military spouses have traditionally been known as the silent service. And it was like a full 5 minutes of laughter. It was like guffaw. And he was like, well, if they issue you guys in sea bags, like, you did not know that. And I think there's been a lot of women who are, you know, smiling and nodding, same. And it's nice to see panels like this, and we hope to see more of them so we can learn from each other and share best practices on how to pursue your own career at the same time while supporting your service member. But I'll take that. A sense of humor is required for any marriage, but especially a military marriage. Your position as a military spouse really becomes part of your brand, but it's not the only part of your brand. And I'm very honored to lead the conversation with these women to learn more about their experiences as military spouses. So before we start, why don't we go down the line, and if each of you could just please introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about either your current projects or your programs for yourself or for your branch, and just help us to get to know you a little bit.
Okay. My name is Fran Danino Zukunft, and I am the Ombudsman at Large for the Coast Guard. I'm also the First Lady of the Coast Guard, and I'm also the First Lady of Fun, so that's even more important. Let's see, my current projects, I work a lot with the Ombudsman and trying to improve the Ombudsman program. The other thing I do is I also work a lot with what I call the sales and marketing. Many years ago, I was a pharmaceutical sales representative for over 25 years, and so that sales and marketing part came in very easy for me because as with the Coast Guard, a lot of people don't know a lot about the Coast Guard. You know, they think that we just stay in the shallow water, that we just rescue people, and that there's nothing else involved, and they don't realize, you know, that we're everywhere, that we're on, at some point we're on all the continents, you know, that our people oftentimes are in small, you know, places, and so you know, we're part of the community, and so I like to talk to the congressmen or senators when they come over for meals, you know, about what our Coast Guard people do in the communities, because they do a lot of volunteer work. It's not just, you know, going out there search and rescue and that's it. You know, they're in there helping out in the schools and the fire department, you know, a lot of different areas. So I try to talk with them about that. And one of my recent initiatives has been to try to get more child care centers set up for the Coast Guard families, because that's been a big thing for our people. And it's really hard to do your job when you're worried about your kids and worried about where they're gonna stay during the daytime. What happens if they get sick? You know, all those things that, you're concerned about, especially if you've just had a baby and you're, really worried about you want to check in on them. So I wanted to make sure that that was a priority for me. And I did find out that we did get some funding, pretty good funding, as a matter of fact, in this budget, this last budget, to help us with the CDC. So that's a start, and we need to keep those conversations going, and that's been really important to me. I also try to get involved a lot with women's leadership at headquarters and throughout the Coast Guard to try to find out what other concerns that our members have, and then also to learn from our members as well, because they teach me a lot of things that I don't know, that, because I'm not in the military myself. So those are just some of the things that I'm working on.
Hi, I'm Gina Busby. I am a retired Navy wife, and yes, we do get to call ourselves that when they retire. He retired about 4 years ago from the U.S. Navy after 34 years. He's sitting on the front row. I'm afraid he's going to heckle me. But we settled in Norfolk, Virginia. We had been stationed there and loved it a lot. And we also have a boat that we get to take out onto the Chesapeake Bay. And shortly after settling and feeling so comfortable, he got a job in D.C. So we are geo-batching even after the Navy. But I am a professional fine artist. It's something I've worked on all my life, pretty much since I was 5 years old. And I have been very blessed to have landed in a great neighborhood and have a nice following of friends and family and military, and I really enjoy that. I work on that mostly out of a studio in Norfolk above our garage, and in my spare time, I really enjoy volunteering for the Armed Services YMCA. And if you don't know about that, then you need to go home and Google it. It's a wonderful organization. They do a great deal, mostly focused on our senior enlisted and their families, but the programs are phenomenal, and they're in different parts of our country. Just look those up. Bill French is here, and he's our national president, so I have to make sure I'm saying the right things. But I enjoy doing that. I also enjoy still volunteering with the Tidewater Officer Spouse Association. I lead a couple of their crafting kind of classes, and that's in my skill set, and I enjoy that. Those are things that we sell for a profit, and then that money goes to military charities in the Hampton Roads area. We're also members of Navy League, so thank you, Navy League, for having us here and encouraging the spouses to speak up and tell you a few of our anecdotes about Semper Gumby. So thank you.
My name is Elka Giordano, and I am married to the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy. McPon 14 is what he likes to be called. We have been married for about 18 years, and we have 2 girls, school age. I tell you, we have moved about 9 times, and my oldest has been to 7 different schools. She's only a junior. And my little one, only in 2nd grade, she has moved 3 times. So that's just a typical everyday family in the service. So it's no shocking for anyone who serves. I'm also the Navy Ombudsman at Large. I serve in a team of 2. My partner, Barbara Burke, is the spouse to the Chief of Naval Personnel, Admiral Burke. I'm also a member of the Military Family Readiness Council and a board member of the Navy Marine Corps Relief Society. Also serve as an advisor to Naval Service Family Line, which is an organization that is for spouses and by spouses, providing training and education for all of the sea services, including the Coast Guard, and Marine Corps, and Navy. And I see myself quite a bit as an ambassador of military life. I take every opportunity that comes my way to just give a little insight onto what my life as an enlisted spouse is to the community. I have recently started back in the field that I was trained to do. I'm a registered nurse, and after being in the area for a year and a half, I decided to get back into the swing of things and get back to work. And I'm also using my ambassador skills to try and talk my employer into becoming one of those NCEP partners. So yeah, so wish me luck. That's one of my projects right now as well.
Love that. And the more spouses that are in more
That's right.
places and of authority and hiring activities,
That's the hope.
the more that the policies will reflect military-friendly and military family-friendly policies. So let's start, Elka, let's start with you on just a question about, since you are a member of the military and kind of a theme of that, the Military Family Readiness Council. What have you seen in the changes for programming for military families to support the multiple deployments and the geo-batching and the op-tempo post 9/11?
So
Asking for a friend. No.
So it's 9/11. I mean, it is such an important date for everyone. I mean, even international people. You'll ask. We were just recently stationed in Italy, and if you talk, you say 9/11, and they recognize that it's not just our culture here in the States; it's also international. So I think that it hasn't just touched us, those people that serve. I mean, how many of you remember listening to the news? And I mean, I can vividly remember the day I heard that this was going on, and I think all of us do. But more importantly, as a member of the military, as a military family member, to me it meant more. It meant that our life was going to change. We knew war was coming. And it's not like we don't know that this is happening. I mean, obviously we have been in many wars already that the American public wasn't really much, there wasn't a whole lot of awareness about, but 9/11 sort of brought it back to every single American. That sense of patriotism came on, and everyone knew we were on. So as a family member, I thought immediately, my life, as fluid as it is, I mean, we were already overseas, we had been married for just a couple of years, I knew that more change was coming. So I think that just goes without saying, that really changed a whole lot for us as military family members. So, but aside that, when it comes to the Military Family Readiness Council, I can't really speak for the council. That's one of those things that is only done by the chairman. But in coordination with them, I was given some guidance on the topics that I could speak about, and and I was quickly made aware of some of the changes that have happened since 9/11, and one of the most important ones that I don't really call a change because I kind of live in that world and that reality of technology. We're now using technology to our advantage. We have, it used to be that we just had working knowledge of things, and my working knowledge of computers, it has always been there. But for the generations that were here before that, that really changed the whole plane. I mean, social media, we have systems such as and every branch has a different one, but the accountability and personnel and accountability systems that allow families from all over the world to just basically check in and say that they're safe. They each have different names in each branch, but those are things that came due to the technology, taking advantage of those pieces. And that was one very important thing. The other thing that I think overall the American public learned during the events of 9/11 is the need for communication, not only within organizations, but amongst organizations. FEMA presents a great example of how that lack of communication during those crises didn't help matters any. We had first responders speaking one language, and we had, the police systems using a different language, the military using a different language, and that was kind of chaotic. And I think the integration of all of the different technologies and just making sure that we are all talking the same plain language, especially during crisis. I think that event alone created that playing field and that perspective for our families. The other thing is the coordination and partnerships that I see now more and more throughout the time that I've been a member of the Military Family Readiness Council. I've had the privilege of listening to a lot of subject matter experts come in and brief us about their products, their services, their resources, and how they are looking to partner with other organizations, all under the government. A lot of them are things like TRICARE and all the different branches and all these programs. DHA is one of those, and they're looking to create ways to fill in the gaps. I mean, we know we have amazing programs out there that are really focused on family readiness, but there are gaps. And unless you're talking to that other group, you're not really going to find out how to solve it and how to catch them. And when these organizations start talking, which they are now, I think that's going to
Good
benefit
start.
our families.
That's a good start. And to kind of play on that and switch gears a little, I'm going to jump down to you, Fran, because we know that military spouse employment is part of those military family programs that sometimes falls to the wayside, except for the spouses who would like emphasis on that as well, knowing that the decision to join the military might be made while one's single, but it's more likely to be, they're more likely to re-up once they're married, and then that's 50% of the decision-making power is on the other side of the table. So we always try to get in that discussion about military spouse employment. Can you give us a little bit of, all three of you, if you'd like, your perspective on maintaining your own career trajectory at the same time as supporting your spouse, and especially for you three more senior spouses, how to do it and make it look so easy?
Well, it's not always easy, but it's doable. I worked for over 25 years in the pharmaceutical industry, and I worked for an international company. I was very fortunate because it was an international company, so they always helped me to find a position wherever we moved. Now, granted, I had to be flexible, so there was times where I knew my husband was going to only be in a certain area for 9 months or so, and so I didn't move during those times. We did a geo-bachelor thing. And then there's another time where we wanted to move to Hawaii. He got orders there. I put in my request to move there, and they actually found a job for me 6 months before he did, and I was ready to go, and so I said goodbye and I let him do everything at home. But, so it was, I had to be flexible, but that was one of the good things about that, about my company, is that they worked with me. The other thing is that, you have to, there's a lot of companies out there. It's not just the pharmaceutical industry. There's a lot of companies out there that are willing to be flexible, that are willing to work with spouses who are looking for employment, and there's more and more companies that are signing on. I've been volunteering recently with Hiring Our Heroes, and that's just one of the organizations. There's several organizations out there that are really good, but they've really reached out to companies and said, will you work with us? And they're even reaching out more, not just the normal ones that you think about, the aerospace industry and those kinds of things, but they're looking at other companies, that anywhere from Starbucks to a lot of to Microsoft and Amazon, all those type of companies as well. And they're trying to figure out, how can we help our spouses? Can they telecommute? Can they work, part-time here and go somewhere part-time? They're very flexible. But we also, as spouses, have to be flexible. We have to open our minds to what other things can we do. I've known other spouses who have been veterinarians, who've been medical doctors. They figure out a way, even though that requires, licensing and all that kind of stuff every time you move. But they figure out, situations, and sometimes you're gonna get a position, you think, oh, do I really want to do this? I've got to go through all those, for me, I always had to go through training. Every time I moved, I had to learn new things. And so sometimes I would think, oh, do I want to do that? But in the end, it was always worth it. And so, it's just that being flexible and being open to that. Like I said, Hiring Our Heroes and other organizations like that will really help you. They've got great networking events that they hold. They have LinkedIn sessions that they also teach you about how to network and how to utilize LinkedIn, because that's really where you find jobs more than, going to a want ad or the old, way we used to do it. And so, connect with those companies. You can also put your resume online. They'll help you build your resume, because there's a lot of things that you're doing as a spouse that you think, well, I didn't get paid for that, but yeah, you were the head, you were running whatever it was. Maybe it was a PTA, maybe you were running a spouse club. You've got all these skills that could be turned into usable skills in the industries. And so, don't be afraid to reach out and get that help, but be flexible about what you want to do.
Gina?
I would say the same as Fran. If you can reinvent yourself, prepare to reinvent yourself. Do some research on your next duty station, and be open to a lot of different possibilities. I had left a 13-year career in higher education, but I ended up being a church secretary, a office manager at a USGA, Gulf Association office in Hawaii. I did revert back and actually help out at the Navy College office in higher education counseling for a while. But when you move every 17 months, it's kind of, challenging, especially if you're not with a corporation or a company that can help you, be flexible and move with your career. But those were some valuable times and some great positions, and I learned from each and every one of them, met wonderful people, civilian and military, through each one. So be prepared to reinvent yourself into something you probably never thought you'd be able to do, even if it's just for a little while in a brand new place.
So when the young spouses ask that very question often, I like to give them the way I thought about it back 18 years ago and the way I look at it now. So 18 years ago, when I looked at my career, I was fresh out of school, went to our first overseas duty station, and there were no jobs for nurses. Here in the States, that would never happen. It has never happened. But overseas, we're completely different. Same thing happened just before I got here in Naples. There were no nursing jobs available. So what I ended up doing was seeking every opportunity, just like they mentioned here. You just go for whatever opportunity comes your way. So I ended up being a volunteer. The Red Cross opened their doors for me, and I became, I worked with immunizations, learned a great deal about immunizations, and then the second time around, I learned about HR, interviewing and placing nurses, not me, other nurses, into positions that were coming available for support. So the point is, as a military spouse, you do become that person that finds talents in other people, and as you become older, you tend to, see it a little bit easier because, of course, you've been around a little longer. And so that gives you that leeway to help all those other spouses. But I tell them that back then, I saw my career as this one linear, you either go up or you're stuck. Now, 18 years later, I look at my career, and even though it has taken several leaps and, valleys and throughout its time, I am in a lateral view of life. I am at a much better place than most of my counterparts who graduated with me, I think. That's just because I'm a positive person, maybe. But I look at it as, how many opportunities have I had? My life is much more filled. my bucket list is much smaller than my counterparts. I have traveled, I have challenged myself, learned new talents, and just found out more about myself. I have much more self-awareness than my counterparts who are still doing what they were doing maybe 10, 15 years ago. I'm not. I have completely changed the course of my career. It does not look anything like what it was supposed to look like 18 years ago. And yet, you know, when it comes to that lateral view, I see myself as a much more accomplished, much more fulfilled life, and I'm still making an income. You know, I maybe a couple of dollars here and there, but if you look at life, like I said, my bottom line is my bucket list is got maybe 5 things. My friends, I mean, they have things such as travel to Europe, done twice, you know? It's just simple things like that I ask my young spouses to take a look at what this opportunity of this lifestyle will give you. Don't just look at your career and think that that is all there is in life. It really isn't. It's just part of you. It's not your whole picture.
Such a good outlook, and it does, you know, so First Data, we were last year's Military Times #1 military-friendly employer, which I say because we've kind of flipped the script on our talent acquisition when we look at military affiliated candidates, and especially with spouses, to train hiring managers to, when you see, you know, 7 states, some OCONUS, they're not fleeing from the law, but that actually that kind of sustainable, you know, constantly moving forward, doing any job at any time so that you can connect to your community and take that next step forward. That is a tremendous, that human capital is worth more. I mean, it's that esprit de corps. That's what you hire for in the private sector, in the public sector, in the nonprofit sector, is the person who picks up the phone after work because they are so mission oriented, and that's military spouses. So to kind of put an arc on that, and Gina, we'll start with you on this. But for those that are approaching retirement or might be thinking about it, neck deep in it, even if you're a young spouse, this is good to know now because you'll need to hear it 10 times. You know, what are some of the, I don't know, tricks or any advice you would have? And really, I would open that up too, to all 3 of you.
You want to go first, or?
You can go ahead.
Well, it's important to, of course, attend any type of classes, TAPS, Transitioning Assistance Program that is near you or you can access. Those are very beneficial to attend, especially together, and take notes and talk about what you've been introduced to at the end of the day. There are also some great books out there, and then, of course, talk to people who have just recently gone through it. I know I had one friend that she went from commanding officer wife to retired officer wife. So she had this little cow, commanding officer wife, and she had an oar, a boat oar, to signify on her table that she had actually made the transition from a senior officer spouse to retired officer spouse. And it was just a pleasant little thing for her to have on her desk and remind her of where she'd been and how far she'd come and what she was able to look forward to. It's helpful to talk, there again, a team approach, just like you might have had to, you know, in any command, team approach, whether you're in command or part of the command, to talk about what you expect out of retirement and what kinds of plans you might enjoy together. And there again, the Semper Gumby comes into play when you think about what kinds of things you'd like to do. Have a plan B, C, and D. And even then, God's going to throw in an E, F, and G, because we would have never thought we would be geo-bachelor couple at this point in our lives. But he's in D.C. and I'm in Norfolk. So communication is the key, and talking about what you hope to enjoy out of those retirement years, what kinds of things you want to do together, what kinds of things you want to do separately, and make the most of it.
Fran?
I've already retired once, from pharmaceutical sales, so I already have that experience of retiring. Now we're going to go through another retirement. And one thing I learned is that, who you are changes. I mean, who you think you are changes, I guess is what I'm saying, because you're always going to be yourself. But you're where you fit in the world. Before I was the pharmaceutical sales rep, I was making tons of money. I was this person who, was in the corporate world, and then I went to being the Coast Guard spouse and not working, and then I got involved with more with the Coast Guard, and then I was, the ombudsman at large. But, so I had to change my own thinking about who I was. But the other thing I learned from retiring is that you have to have a plan. You can't just say, I'm going to go golfing every day, or as my husband said, I'm going to go biking every day. And I said, you know what? Biking and golfing are fun when you're skipping out on work to do it, but they're not as much fun when you can do it all day, every day. So have another plan, and just like you said, have a lot of different plans, available. But try to have something at least in the immediate time when right after you retire to do something, because there's like this feeling that I've got to jump in and do something right away. So you take the first job that comes along, if that's what you're going to be doing. And it might not be the right job for you, but you're just so scared or so worried about figuring out who you are, what you're going to do, that you take it and then you make a mistake. And then sometimes you're even stuck in that job, depending on if you signed any kind of type of agreement. So, have a plan that you're going to maybe take a couple weeks off, or you're going to go take a course, or you're going to do something, but just at least have a plan so that the next day when you wake up and you check your email and you go, oh, I don't have any emails, when before you had 1,000 of them sitting there, or nobody's calling me. Why is anybody calling me? So have that plan.
So for the Giordano home, we believe in the plans. We have A, B, and C in place, because not only do we know that we are going to be retiring in a few years, but we also know that that's just the military life retiring. That's not, we're under 50. We have an 8-year-old right now. We are going to continue to work to put that 8-year-old in college. So we have another 20 years to give to another company, or at least one. So we have those plans in place, and we look forward to the day when there are no emails and no phone calls, but we're enjoying every bit of this aspect of our lives. We know the next is coming, and absolutely, we are already signed up to those classes, those TAP courses that they offer. Yeah, the both of us are signed up for it. You can never be too prepared, is our motto. But however, when the time comes,
Semper
we
Gumby.
know that, yep, you got it.
So, and I have a lot more questions to ask them, but I also want to allow questions from you guys. So if anyone does have a question, Ryan has a mic that he can carry around. Okay, good. Right there.
Hi, I'm Polly Bostic-Veeder. I'm on the board of directors of the Navy League, but I also serve as an ombudsman at the Navy Operational Support Center in Pittsburgh. And one of the issues that we're always struggling with is we're not by a big base. And so have you all had any experience with supporting spouses, as I say, out in the boonies, or the cornfields of Illinois, or the rivers of Pittsburgh, or other places? Because, we've got recruiting commands. The Coast Guard, I know, has a lot of small stations. We've got the Navy Operational Support Centers, a lot of smaller commands out away from the big bases. Thank you.
So my husband and I do quite a bit of travel. I take the role as ombudsman at large, and I accompany him as wherever it is that he goes. If that command in particular feels a little neglected, I tell you, he gets quite a bit of invites to come and be on site, look at what we're living through, look at the living conditions, and that is one of my husband's job to check out those work environments, that quality of life issues, and identify those. As far as the ombudsman program goes, at least for the Navy, I can tell you there is great deal of resources. All you need is internet, really. We offer the program online. You don't ever have to step into a classroom. You can connect now through social media with just about everybody and their grandmothers. So it's the tools and I think all the tools are out there. If particular needs are identified, I like this document that our CNO has developed called the Navy Family Framework. It's amazing, and it calls exactly to those people who see that there is action needed, those spouses, and it wants you to take action, be part of the culture, take ownership. You see the problem, it's not somebody else's job, it is your job to take care of it. So, it gives sort of an outline of how communication and how the command needs to support those spouses. And so I recommend every Navy spouse out there to just take a look at this document and read it and give us your feedback, because we know anytime we travel and we sit at a table with ombudsmen or spouses, we hear a question over here and we hear 10 answers right there. We know that putting people in the same room at the same table is sometimes all that needs to be done for solutions to come up. It's not from us, that it's people talking together and just sitting down and really facing their own problems. And that's how solutions come up. And I think that the Navy Family Framework really goes right to that, to getting that voice to that person to solve the issues.
And it's called the Navy Family Framework?
Yes.
Noted.
I would recommend Naval Services Family Line. I know Elka mentioned it, she's on the board. And don't be misled by the first word, naval. It's Naval Services. So like the Navy League, it encompasses all of the sea services. And we are always trying to embrace more and more Coast Guard families, especially those not near a main base. They have an entire listing of a guideline series. They're booklets that help families in the sea services in almost every category you can think of, and they're happy to ship those to you, get those to you in some way. I know we've even personally delivered some, as well as they sponsor the Compass courses. And those Compass courses are usually at main naval bases or Coast Guard bases or Marine Corps, but the Compass program is very informative, and sometimes they can even put one of those together remotely for you.
And then if people need more resources, there's also the Military One Source is a great, you can get a lot of information there. And then for the Coast Guard, we have CG Support, which is similar to Military One Source, but it's a great place to get a lot of information. And because not everybody has a place that they can go to ask those questions. Instead, they can get online and contact people.
And what we've also seen in a lot of so being from Georgia and a land-grant university, the extension program in the rural areas with 4-H and at the state level has been where a lot of the Guard and Reserve, from my experience, is another way to tie into the local geographic community while using kind of the national umbrella. I think I saw another question.
Yes, Jeff Prosch, and I'm also in the Navy League. First of all, I'd like to thank you ladies for the great work you do. I spent 43 years in the military, 12 years in command, a lot of deployments. And I'll tell you what, the military kind of expects 2 for 1, and you all have punctuated the fact that you are a combat multiplier. And that family readiness is key to combat readiness in a lot of ways, especially when you deploy and you got a strong unit, family, spouse group that takes care of business when we're downrange. So God bless you and thank you for everything you've done. My question is, I was fortunate to be married to a school teacher from North Carolina. That was the good news, and she was a great teacher, the bad news is that when you get redeployed to a place like New York, they say your certification's no good. Have we made any progress in trying to, get some legislation or some help in this regard to help our teacher spouses?
Yeah, I was going to say, so I know from the military community family policy out of DOD has their list of 10 issues that they grade individual states on, green, yellow, red, for about 10 issues around military families. Licensing and certification is one of those. So I know I've seen a lot more green states over the past 10 years, but I would also love to hear the experience from your branches.
I think that's definitely been one of the improvements since 9/11. Elka mentioned, we've all just seen how much the country's come around to learn more and want to know more about our military. And we're still at less than 5% of our population serving in the military. But I think part of the certification process for not just teachers, but other occupations and careers has really improved. I know that moving 17 months on the average was going to make it very difficult to teach myself, and I had taught art before. But there again, going back to the reinventing yourself, I taught privately, adults, retirement home, and homeschool children. So there are other options, but I think certification process has really come around.
Yeah. The registered nurse over there.
Yeah, so we have, the nursing profession had kind of, well, I wouldn't say led the way, but it does have a great group of compound states that participate, and I can have my license endorsed. I don't need to take any tests. I just need to pay whatever the state decides, which is something like, whatever the state decides, I need to pay them to get my license renewed by their state, and then I'm all set. I can start working. But now, back to your question, the Military Family Readiness Council is really looking into this particular topic. A lot of us spouses and the committee have made sure that this is one of those priorities, and it has been placed onto the Defense State Liaison Officers. They have a list of action items that they're working on, and state licensure, as well as the education continuum for our kids, is also being addressed. So those two
Yeah.
topics in particular, I can tell you, we have done quite a bit of improvement since I started 18 years ago.
Yeah. You're hearing the meat and potatoes of military family life issues, military spouse employment, and military kids are finally coming to the top, to the top of the heap.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you want to keep up with those, there's a lot going on, and it's always changing. So the next meeting for the Military Family Readiness Council is on June 6th. So I invite you to look them up. They're on Military One Source, actually holds their information. So if you Google them, you can actually see all of the recommendations that they make for the Secretary of Defense. So they're basically an advisory board for the Secretary of Defense, and also the 4 committees, the Armed Forces committees. So last year's, it made one of the top 10 recommendations. So absolutely,
And
we're
they even
working
have,
there.
and they even have the downloadable best practices, the other states that have passed certification and licensing, reciprocity or fast tracking, so that if you are in a state that is yellow or red, it's easier to download, take to your legislators and say, here's the myriad of other states that are already doing it. But I've seen a lot more green on that that heat map that Military One Source has. Is there? Oh.
Hi, I'm Sarah Krigler. I'm a Coast Guard spouse for coming up on 22 years. And speaking to what Mrs. Giordano said about you ask one question and there's 10 answers, I have one answer for our ombudsman in a remote spot looking for support, but we were most recently in Port Angeles, Washington, and many of our families had a hard time finding medical practices that were accepting new patients. That seemed to be like the issue that came up over and over again. And so our ombudsman and our senior chief at the clinic actually met with the hospital president and brought the issue to him, and he then passed to his offices that worked under the umbrella of his hospital, that if a military family called and requested a primary care provider, that they were required to accept a military family who was new to the area as primary care. So that was a huge accomplishment for our clinic and for our ombudsman. Now, my question is retirement related, because that's on my horizon. Is there anything in the planning that you wished you had spent a little more time on, or anything that kind of like slapped you upside the head that you weren't quite prepared for in the retirement, that if you could kind of, you know, go back and maybe, you know, get a mulligan on something and do it over? Is there anything that really surprised you in the process?
There were
looking
quite
back?
a few. Thank you for the question. I've never been more thankful that we owned a wooden boat, because it was a hobby and it was a project. And it's important for them, each of you, to have projects and hobbies. Fill your calendar with things that you've always put off, that you've wanted to do. But for the first time in our marriage, he was home all of the time. So, and I wanted him to take a while before he dove right back into another career. I wanted him to take, you know, he's not the kind of person that enjoys downtime. So he was very good about always being busy. But then winter came, and it wasn't a good time to work on the boat, and it wasn't a time to go out on the boat, and he was home. And I came home one afternoon, and he goes, I know you're going to hate me for telling this story, but he goes, look, honey, we have a tong drawer in the kitchen just for all of the tongs, salad tongs, barbecue tongs, serving tongs. And I'm like, what is this? You need to go find a friend and go on a hunting trip or something. You know, you do not rearrange my kitchen. And I do not flippantly mention books, but there is a good book out there, and it's called For Better, For Worse, But Not For Lunch. It's hilarious, but it's very good. It's chock full of great tips and pieces of advice for someone entering into retirement for the first time. And you know, you will hear a lot of people will say, this is little r, just like Fran was saying, different retirement levels, and Elka, the military is usually referred to as little r, and then when they go get another job in another career, that's big R when they retire from that. So there are phases, but make sure they have a hobby. No, now the TAPS programs, those classes will make sure you know all the paperwork set up right, and they go through all of the health exams and everything. No, I think the most enlightening thing for us, having never had to dress him in a suit, was where do you go to buy all these expensive suits and ties, and you know, but getting that set up, and they cover that as well. It's really good to sit in on one of those.
And in my defense, we know where every tie is.
That is amazing. Another question?
So I will get to a question, but one of the comments earlier was about when you get people together, there's usually an answer somewhere else in the room. So you were talking about spouses and children and education for children as one of the top 10. So I retired in 2012. In 2015, the governor of Massachusetts appointed me as the commissioner to the Military Interstate Children's Compact Commission. And it's tasked with breaking down the barriers that military children experience when they move between different states that have different standards. And it's a compact, and all 50 states have signed it now. Mm-hmm. So it's not like a suggestion. It now has the rule of law, so your children cannot be put at a disadvantage because they're coming from one school system to another. Our problem is, and where the question then becomes, because in some states that most of the military members are distributed. Coast Guard is one of them. Recruiters that there aren't school systems that we can go into to make sure that they know that we're here. So it becomes an activity of, if the military member knows to go look for it, they'll find us. But it's a passive activity. So how do we get the information of the resources so that the military spouses and the military members know where to look? Because there's people out there. When we get problems, we can solve them. But if we don't know about the problems, we can't solve them. So it's sort of a question, but I'm curious to see your thoughts about how to get the information to folks. Even though it's required and it's in orders and everything else, people still don't know where to look.
Military liaisons?
It's a defense liaison.
I don't, are you trying to answer? Okay, go for it. Let me think about it some more.
Rafael Ortiz here in multiple ways. A retired Coast Guard Reserve, currently an active military spouse. My wife's Air Force, active duty here in D.C. To answer the question, I think it's got multiple answers. Number one is, and I also just volunteered to sign on for the National Retiree Hotline. So you dial an 800 number and you get an old retired guy that basically does a Google search for you and finds your answer for you. But
That's a good hobby.
but in that, where are the resources? And I think the best way to do that is multiple ways, one of which is what you're doing now, networking within associations. Knowing that information now, everyone here can go back and possibly put it on the web, put it on the page, put it in as an adjunct down to the Navy Leagues has now, okay, for military families, kids education, here's a link. I just got involved yesterday with Together We Serve. Together We Serve is only in 14 areas, but they have the funding now and have a computer program where different veterans organizations tie in and go to a central hub and will say, okay, say I provide homeless or homes for vets. A vet will come to me, they'll say, hey, I'm homeless, I need something. Oh, by the way, I need transportation. Well, I don't do that. But what this organization has now created is a computer model and system where you send that information to a hub, and there's now 14 areas. They're doing it locally first. We'll send it out and find that person and also give you electronic follow-up on whether or not that got done. So there's also a tail to it. So Together We Serve is doing that here in the DC area, as well as San Diego and a couple other places that are only doing it locally, but there's an answer for you as well in addition to the organizations. Military One Source, I would say the Military Coalition also is a good place to put that out and say, look, because whereas not everyone's joining the organizations, which we talked about before and having problems, there are organizations and references and resources out there. It's just a matter of spreading the word.
There is, and then those, the Military Community Family Policy out of Department of Defense under Personnel and Readiness, they have those state liaisons that I think we've mentioned a couple times that they track those issues, and the compact is one of them that now that it's signed, it's getting it followed within state legislatures. And I will tell you that probably the best advocate is a family that's going through it, and there's a lot of different ways that that's been able to bubble up, whether it's through social media groups like the Navy League or AUSA or MOA putting it out on an all-call saying, if you live in Massachusetts and you are a military family and you have been affected by interstate compact issues of sports, academics, let me know. And that's, I think, where most of the states have had the best results have been working with those installations. The PAOs are always a good one to reach out to because then they reach out to the Spouses Club, the Ombudsman. So that's, yeah.
And leadership, I always refer people back to leadership. If you go and touch that particular command, for as tiny as it could be, I mean, if you touch that leadership and you tell them who you are and what you're doing for our Navy families, you're going to have
A line.
the PAO, that ombudsman, that.
Well, I get about maybe half a dozen calls every year about the time that registration's going on, and almost every single one of them, the person calling is the ombudsman, because they know about the program. It's the ability to get that information
Sure.
out of the ombudsman
To the families.
Yeah. And also, God bless you for doing what you do,
Yes.
because that we need people like you in every state that are advocating for our families.
So the reason I'm doing then, if you ran into a problem, the answer from my dad was suck it up, take it out. But today, they don't have to do
No.
that. So I'm doing this because these kids they're part of the readiness chain.
Absolutely.
And so making sure that they are not put at a disadvantage, not giving them an advantage, but just make sure.
Yeah.
We've added the locals, the Massachusetts State Interscholastic Athletic Association, all of these other groups in order to support the kids so that they can make those transitions, break down some of those barriers that they see
Yeah.
that they don't have to break down themselves.
So you're doing exactly what I mentioned on the very first question, just the inter offices and different organizations kind of connecting and linking in to see where the holes are, because there are holes. I mean, no matter what service one provides, there will be some cracks where families get, shuffled into. And so coordinating with other, childcare, going to those board meetings for those, sometimes my husband says that I'm the queen at making myself just busting the door to meetings and just going into what he says it so. I think it sounds great. Oh, I always inject myself, and it's like that's the only way I can get a foot in the door, right? I mean, I don't know any other way. If I wait here for someone to invite me, I'm not going to get to see what they're doing. What if I can help them? What if they can help me?
I can help them.
So, yeah, I invite you to just be part of everything that surrounds that population. I mean, from sports, from music to, the educational board itself. And their training. Where are they going to school that they need to find out, where are these educators training that they need to know that we are a particular breed of individuals that have certain needs, and there are organizations out there working for us, and yeah, invite yourself
Love that.
in.
Invite yourself to the table. And I know we're getting the wrap up. Do we have time for one more question, or?
Yeah, we have almost 50 minutes.
One more question, okay.
Almost 50 minutes.
Oh, okay. Several more questions.
Thank you for your presentation and insights today. My name is Jaya Ghosh, and my question is a little bit different, but how do you see your leadership positions as being role models and advocates for women in the services, as well as moving up in the government? And how have you best helped guide women who are trying to move up in this leadership pipeline? I may be asking for a friend.
You go ahead. I'm trying to think of an answer.
When it comes to leadership, I think that is just something that comes naturally. You can be a leader at being the best housekeeper in this building. As long as you own that job, I think that, I can't tell exactly how the quote goes, but I remember something about President Kennedy going through NASA and speaking to that, this guy mopping the floor. I can't remember the quote. I don't know. But the storyline is that this guy mopping the floor, when he was asked by the president, what is it that you do for the organization? And he says, I am helping put a man in the moon. And because it gives you that sense of ownership. This person knows that they are part of this organization and they have a part in the whole overall mission for this organization. They have that sense of ownership. So when it comes to being a leader, I think that as long as a person has that, no matter whatever it is that you decide to go and do, you will be that person. Just like Fran said, you are who you are. You're either a leader or you're not, and it's okay to not be one. I particularly don't identify myself as a leader. People have just certain views of what a leader is. Also, we can ask 10 people in this room, and they are all going to give you a different answer. As far as being a female in the political world, couldn't tell you very much about that. Never have seen myself as any. I avoid that topic for obvious reasons. I think after retirement it'll be a different story. But I don't know, I don't know if you ladies have.
I would say mentoring is very important. If you are in a leadership role, or even if you're, just a part of a group and you're being yourself and you're doing what you feel comfortable doing, mentor someone else who might need that same kind of guidance or advice, and help bring them along, and it trickles down.
And I would also say, get to know the other people, either people who are working for you or with you. Really get to know them as people. I think that's what makes you a good leader and a good mentor, is knowing who you're working with and knowing that they're not just the person that comes in the door and sits at the typewriter, or sits at the computer. I could tell my age here. Sits at the computer and just, puts in information. They have, there's other things that are going on with their life. So if you take an interest in that, I think that's important. And I think it's important to be yourself and to, what I always try to tell people is that there's no perfect life out there. Sometimes, as the fact that my husband's the commandant of the Coast Guard, and you think, oh wow, they've got it. They've got everything. And I'll be honest with people. I'll tell people, hey, I cried when my husband took this job as commandant. It only cried for an hour or so, but still, I did cry. And I've talked to other people, and they've said the same thing. They cried when their husband or their spouse said they were going to move to whatever. Yes, I'm human. I've got those emotions. I haven't had a perfect life. My kids have, done everything you could think of that could have driven us crazy, and they weren't perfect. They somehow have managed to survive me from you. But I think it's important to be yourself, and I always try to have a sense of humor too, because I think it helps people feel a little bit more relaxed, and so don't take your life too seriously, but try to help other people as you can. And I think you're a great leader. Don't underestimate yourself.
Good afternoon, ladies. I'm Jay Rindler with the San Diego Council of the Navy League. And one of the things the San Diego Council is doing right now is to helping out the spouses. We do a spouse support luncheon, and we do a couple of scholarships. And then also the program that I'm involved with is Operation Welcome. So all the Marine, Navy, and Coast Guard and Sea Service units in San Diego, we help put the homecoming festivities on the pier or the hangar or whatever. But my question to you ladies is there anything else we could do to help, or if we could, oh, that's the question.
Employment fairs, or do you do any kind of employment assistance with them and the spouses? Well, it sounds like you're doing a wonderful job.
I'm not exactly sure where the lines are for the Navy League. I don't know exactly which programs and services you guys are. I don't have it out of the top of my head. Mary, you're going to have to help me. But I can tell you that I see a lot of success with spouses getting to know you as the brand, the Navy League, in areas where you're targeting the young spouses. They're the ones that need us the most. They're the ones that need the most, but yet they don't get to the information or the resources when they need them. Why? Because a lot of times they're not connected to the big community. So your young spouses should be your target. I would encourage you to. The reason is they need more programs and services to tailor to them. Two, I also, I like to see organizations, all of what are qualified as the non-federal entities, start working together. I can't tell you how many times I hear, oh yeah, the so-and-so is producing this program and this, so-and-so is producing this programs. And at our level, we hear a lot of them, and we think back and it's like, why can't they just talk? Why can't they just connect to that other service that is already offering the same exact and just augment and maybe even tailor it just a little bit. But why does it matter that it has your name, Navy League versus USO or other? Does it really matter? Does it matter that it's, yeah, partnering with the organization to create a better, bigger, more reach program?
The Armed Services YMCA in San Diego focuses on junior enlisted. Good. See, you're already doing it.
So you'll see like, especially at an aircraft carrier homecoming, you'll see like about all these booths all lined up.
Partnering, good.
And I think also if you can advocate for us politically as well, because we, as spouses, we can't go up to our legislators and say, you know, don't be passing this and don't be passing that, you know, but you guys can advocate and say, hey, you know, these are military, you know, hopefully you can. I would assume that the Navy League can do stuff like that, you know, so.
We've got nods and okay.
We'll exchange business cards afterwards.
Did you?
I'm Pat Dumont, the National Vice President of the Navy League, and I live in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. But one of the topics that hasn't been mentioned and I want to share with you is when you go into communities where there are Navy Leagues, those are business people in the community. And I'm a past chair of our Fort Lauderdale chamber where we have 1,500 members in the business community. So don't just think of Navy League or any organization as only representing that area. Think of us as a conduit to the community for all kinds of things. And I want to say thank you to you all. You are so sincere and dear and loving, and we are so lucky to have you as part of our
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And so maybe let's wrap up with going down the line, and if there was, you know, one piece of advice that you would give a younger spouse just trying to make their way in the military lifestyle, what would it be?
Oh, gosh. I would say have a sense of humor, have fun, and be flexible. So that's 3, but sorry, you know, you don't get one out of me.
I always encourage spouses, just like you just mentioned, to have support groups, but not necessarily all military support groups. Every place I went, I tried to have a core group of friends that were not associated with the military in any way, shape, or form. I think it's not to detract from your military experience or connections, but it's a well-rounding kind of experience, and you learn things about your community from them that you wouldn't hear otherwise, and it is just a fruitful relationship.
Yeah, just as they both mentioned, networking. I find that there is a wealth of information within the community, the military community and your local community. So seek every opportunity to connect to other people and create those meaningful relationships. So just be a good steward to your service and to your family, and get yourself out there.
Don't wait to be invited.
That's right.
That's a great line. Thank you all, and thank you all for your very candid, insightful, sassy input. And it's like every military spouse event I ever go to, when I leave, my cheeks hurt because I've been smiling so much and laughing. So thank you so much. Can we give our esteemed panel a round of applause again? Thank you guys. And I now have the honor of turning over the microphone to Alan Kaplan, the 49th National President of the Navy League of the United States.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to thank Dr. Greentree. She really is really highly educated, as she said. Thank you for moderating the panel. And, what Dr. Greentree and First Aid do for our military families is nothing shy of spectacular. So thank you. So I'm really proud, as National President, this is a first-time event. and you're going to see a lot of first-time events for Navy League, but the spouse panel is our first ever, and congratulations for being part of the panel, and we're really proud to have you. So thank you.
Thank you.
So recognizing our spouses, our service spouses, is something that I'm really passionate about. And I can assure you that this recognition will continue throughout my presidency. Ladies and gentlemen, this afternoon isn't quite over yet. I'd like to introduce Sheila McNeil, our 42nd national president. Sheila has the distinction of being not only our first female national president, but someone who I'm really proud to call a friend. Sheila.
Wow, this was wonderful. Thank you very much. I have to tell you, I was telling Admiral Busby earlier that about 25 years ago, a friend of mine, well, she was not a friend of mine, she was actually an officer's wife, who somehow we just touched immediately. We felt like friends. And then I said, we can't become good friends. You're leaving in 6 months. And she said, Sheila, I promise you, if we become good friends, we will remain good friends the rest of our lives. I didn't believe her at the time. That was 30 years ago, and about a month ago, they spent the weekend with us. We don't talk with them all the time, and now I have friends all over the country because I opened up to that one military wife. And it's one of the good things about being in the Navy League is meeting so many wonderful people that reach out to our military, and you guys are awesome.
I hear St. Mary's is a lot warmer than DC right now, so get
Exactly.
that guest room ready.
It's very much warmer. What resiliency and what confidence you all have. And for our first one, Alan, this was really a good opportunity for us. I hope to see it more. I love the questions that turned out to be a lot of solutions, too, from the audience. So thank you. I'm writing as fast as I can for some of those. But we have a little memento for you. Fran? Thank you very much. You can put it on your desk.
How pretty, thank you.
Gina, this is for the Tom drawer.
Yeah. I'll put it in the top drawer.
Elka, thank you very much. Just appreciate it so much. Wait a minute. Can you take one like this? Oh,
We'll
let's
stand
see how
up.
he takes a picture.
Let's see.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Join us all on the exhibition floor, if you will, and we'll continue talking. You're dismissed.
Thank you.